So today we're going to look at round 6 of the 2013 World Chess Championship taking place in Chennai, India throughout the month of November. And we've got the defending champion Viswanathan Anand. He's down, he was down already 1 point. He lost to Carlsen recently in round 5, now losing round 6. He's down 2 points. Basically, Carlsen has 4 points, Anand has 2. And there's 6 games left in the match. It's going to be extremely difficult for Anand to come back, and we'll see if he can do it. So we're going to see Anand open today with e4. Roy Lopez, no surprise. Carlsen with this knight f6. He's ready to go to maybe a Berlin defense. He's kind of indicated he wants to do that. We've seen it recently. And Anand, he tries d3. I like this move myself because you avoid the main lines of the Berlin defense. And so we can see after bishop c5 and this move c3 that its play is kind of resembling more like a Gyoko piano here. And so this is nothing crazy at all. Both sides really just making some standard moves. And Carlsen noticed that he hasn't touched his pawn yet because he can push it to d5 in some lines directly. And so, again, moving forward through the opening, really nothing crazy. Black wants to gain some space on the queen side. There are some lines here with h6, bishop b7, and d5 that I like. I think they're pretty cool. A little more aggressive, the lines with bishop b7. Carlsen plays d6. And so, to back up here, I personally like the bishop going to e3, where black usually doesn't want to take, brings a white pawn closer to the center, and white's going to get the f-file. I personally like this idea with bishop e3. But the bishop g5, we're going to see, it's a different idea. And so bishop e6, Carlsen, makes kind of now we have some imbalance here. And now with this h6 move and bishop h4, this is a really interesting line. I really prefer black in this position because, just very slightly, but I do, because when you see the bishop on h4, it is annoying. I mean, it's exploiting the fact that black's bishop on c5, there's not an easy way for black to break that pin. But what we're going to see, a lot of times in this kind of setup, like this Italian game setup, you want to see white playing the knight to g3 or even to e3. But it just feels kind of clustered for white. It feels like black's position is a little more fluid. It's just easier to play. And also, black is going to have this plan with g5. And this is why I like black. I like this idea of playing g5, although Carlsen didn't really play this game. So we see Carlsen exchanges here, and this kind of indicates to me he might be trying to play d5, and his rook is now going to be backing up this pawn directly. And this knight to b8 move is an interesting idea. I mean, it's definitely nothing crazy, nothing new in these types of positions. Rerouting the knight towards f8 and to g6 or e6. So it's going to take a long time to do that, but the position is definitely closed. And it's, you don't see white he's not going to do anything crazy in the center. If white plays d4, black is just going to go back, and now black is going to have pressure on this d4 point. So it's just annoying to defend it. So white does, there's no rush to play that. So knight b8 is cool. And we can see the focal points of the position. I mean, black wants to get a knight on f4. However he can do that, probably e6 or g6. And white wants to do something similar. He wants to get a knight on f5 or on d5 here. And so, okay, h3, I mean, this is a useful move. Making Luft for the king, you say, and really he wants to maybe use this g4 as a jump-off point and also to pile up on the pinned knight. Knight d7, no surprise. And so here, queen e7, this is interesting because, okay, so first of all, black, he can move his queen anywhere as the knight's going to be defended. Doesn't have to worry about his pawns getting messed up. But, what's black's plan here? I mean, if he plays d5 here with the idea of playing g5, I mean, this is pretty interesting. I mean, this is pretty cool. But Black has a lot of holes around his king that he's going to have to come back. And this, I don't know, this would have been cool. Carlsen goes a different way. Instead, he plays Queen E7. We see Anand is getting ready to do something with his knights over here. Bishop B6. Now D4 is just not going to win a tempo. And so knight to E3. And so now we can see he's made progress. His knight is reaching these squares, but what you can say about Black, and Carlsen's up. He was up a game in the match, so he can chill. He doesn't have to. There's no pressure to win. Black has an incredibly solid position. This pawn on A6 is kind of weak. I mean, you kind of want to push to A5 if you can to lessen the pressure, but Queen E6. I mean, this is pretty cool. And I think here, this bishop's not doing anything at all. This bishop is killing it. It's one of the best pieces in the game. And Black's knights are going to be ready to make the transition to hit some weak squares. So we see B4. Makes sense. Also Queen E6, eyeing this D5, lessening the effect of the knight F5, and also putting a little bit of pressure on this guy. So B4, trying to clamp down. Makes sense. A5. It's a good idea. I mean, Carlsen, he's really just chilling. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to play this. You can try the C6 and D5 route. You can try to play knight F8 and G5 and knight to G6. But again, you have to realize if you're Black, if you play G5, you win a tempo, it's a big attack move, that's great. But, especially without the light squared bishop, this knight coming to F5, I mean, that's gonna be rough. That will be an incredible piece. So A5, we see bishop takes. And the idea with bishop takes is if rook takes, now we can see that white, I don't know. I mean, Black just doesn't have a rook on the A file. It was an idea though, because now maybe the queen comes over here. It's kind of annoying, but it would be leaving the king kind of wide open. So takes with the bishop. And just goes right back. Says trades are okay with me. And we're going to see the tactical justification of playing this bishop move. And we can see that Black right now, I mean, they're just fighting for the A file. Maybe he's going to play rook to A2. Try to sneak in there. So Anand goes to simplify. And here's the tactical justification. Knight D5 doesn't work because you just take on F2. We'll check. So that's, it's a simple idea by Carlsen. And Black, I mean, this position should just be a draw. I mean, it's pretty crazy that Anand lost this game. I mean, right here, I mean, Black, Black's position is a little more comfortable with the nice bishop, but I mean, you're gonna have to trade it for this knight. The knight will be too strong. So Anand plays Queen G4. He's just, basically connecting the rooks here, putting a little bit of pressure on the king side. And Carlsen decides to take the knight. And so now we can see, Black is very, very slowly starting, trying to create some imbalances. The rook can't take because it's tied to the rook on A1. And so now it's a different ball game with this pawn. Earlier it was like the pawn was good because we had attacking chances. But now that there's not many pieces left on the board, there's not really anything you can do with that open F file. And meanwhile, these double pawns are just a little bit clumsy. So it's very instructive how Carlsen played. Queen E7, so just, okay, rook F1's not going to do anything. Now we see C5. And so C5, at first you think he's trying to prevent D4, but Carlsen actually has a really cool way of hurting these pawns with C4. We're going to see the resulting pawn structure is favorable for Black. King H2 is just a useful move. Now we see C4. So really cool play by Carlsen. I mean, just very steady. He just inch by inch. And now we can start seeing that Black is going to have an advantage in this endgame. You cannot take this because now these pawns are really weak and the B pawn is just a weakness. So White should be able to hold this because of the limited material, but it's just it's not going to be fun. So c4 basically forces d4. And right here, if pawn takes, you can't actually win this pawn. When we come out of the complications, let's say from right here, if pawn takes, or I guess we would start with rook takes, pawn takes, and it looks like you're going to win this pawn. But after we exchange, we can see if we want to throw the check in, which I probably wouldn't. It just kind of brings black's king a little closer. Just rook here. Maybe you do throw the check because of b4. So we would see something like this. And this endgame would be pretty good for white. I mean, it would probably be just a draw. So Carlsen doesn't want to draw. So after c4, d4, we see takes, queen to b7. I mean, this is an interesting move. I mean, now, first of all, the white rook has no entry squares on the a file. Everything's covered. He's starting to lean on this. He's making a threat. If white doesn't do anything, let's say he goes here, he's created this threat of winning this pawn. So queen b7 is sneaky. If d5, now we can start thinking about moves like queen b6 to lean on this. Doesn't do too much, maybe just b4. And this might have been the best thing for Anand in this position to allow this. I mean, the pawns are weak, but they're very difficult to attack. Black has some initiative here on the queen side, but I just don't think it's enough. But it's not very comfortable, like thinking about this, like this does not look very fun for white. Just an idea. So okay, so here in this position, instead of d5, Anand plays rook d1. So maybe he's trying to create some counterplay. Queen c6, just limiting, just basic prophylaxis. And if he takes, we're going to take with the rook. And so queen f5, just trying to lean on this guy. Maybe he's going to put pressure. And Carlsen decides to mix it up. And now after rook takes, I mean, this is pretty ugly pawns. Had to take with the rook. If he takes with the pawn, now there's not a way for the rook to attack the b pawn. After all the exchange, as before when the rook was on a1, I mean, we could attack the b pawn. Now we can't. So here after it takes, rook takes. Okay, so Anand is thinking, how can I not hold this game? The equal material. You got some ugly pawns, but the rook is in a good spot. We got pressure on d6 in exchange. And, black can't really bring his king over here because it's just going to be too dangerous. The queen and rook are still enough to create threats. So here, rook e5, I mean, black is an edge, but is it enough? I think white should be able to hold this. Especially, 45 minutes, I mean, no time problems. You can see both sides, just trying to make improvements. King h1, I mean, can't think of anything better. White, that's the thing in this position. White has got to defend passively. So that's not fun. But, honestly, I mean, how does black break through? I mean, he can't. How is he going to put more pressure on this pawn? Again, he doesn't want to bring his king over because it would be too exposed from the a file. So it's like, well, what's he going to do? I mean, queen f3 here, it just seems fine. I mean, he can't really even play f5. This just doesn't work. I mean, it just blatantly does not work. So, I mean, I'm looking at this position. I can't figure out how does black make any progress? I mean, he playing b4, just it's not going to do that much. White's rook is well placed. And then Anand played queen g3, and so he got tired of waiting. I mean, I don't know how Carlsen was going to break through. It seemed like it was going to be a draw. Queen g3, and now black takes a chance to mix it up. And we see in this position, I mean, Anand, I guess, just figured, hey, I mean, I can just force a draw, but it's not that easy. I mean, it should be a draw with good play from white here. But we'll see Anand, he first he sacrifices a pawn. You understand why he does it is now black's pawns are going to be isolated, or if black plays g5, now white has created a weakness. This pawn on h6 is a very real weakness. But Carlsen takes it, and I mean, he just played like a computer. Incredibly played. So the technique from Carlsen, he's got 2 extra pawns, but this double, I mean, these are pretty ugly. But we're going to see that the game plan is going to be eventually to sack this pawn, to deflect this pawn, and push this guy. So it's an easy game plan. Right now, white's got activity with his rook, but we'll see that, I mean, Carlsen's technique was just incredible. He just inches forward and Anand never has a chance. No counterplay. So we can see here, you know, I mean, black's just inching forward. He tries to stop him. And now Carlsen, I mean, this is instructive. You know, there comes a point in a lot of these rook in games where you got to sacrifice a pawn to activate your rook. And so that's what he does here. This pawn's not important, and we're going to see that this pawn is still clamping these guys down. So, you know, it's like he sacked a pawn, but I mean, these pawns, they can't mobilize. So he just inches forward. I think g3 here, I don't know, it's possible. I mean, but it doesn't do anything but create a weakness. Now he's starting h4, and now he's going to be winning that pawn. So, you know, g3 just doesn't want to move, but Carlsen with h4, I mean, this was pretty cool. We see this king h5. It's very weird, but it's just going to be temporary. And now it's to the point in this endgame that black's going to be able to start trying to, if he needs to, he can sacrifice a pawn to trade rooks, because we can see that these pawns are, you know, black's one pawn is beating both of those. And so rook f4, I mean, you know, kind of a weird technique here by Carlsen. I mean, but it's cool. I mean, it worked out well. This rook f4 plan is so patient. And we can see the idea now. I think he was trying to play for rook f1 and mate. Maybe this was the idea. Like here, if white plays this, forces this, and maybe now he's making more progress. Just an idea. So now, you know, he's got to change plans. White's putting pressure on c4. And we see that black has just used that pawn that Anand sacked a while ago. This is a real pawn now. And so we see black just inching forward. He sacks the other pawn, but, you know, look at the threats. So we see f4. And white, you know, he's created some counterplay, but I mean, how many moves is he going to take? Like, you know, you don't have 5 free moves. He's going to get checkmated, or black's going to queen here first. So black plays h3, just very thematic. He sacks the pawn, and we can see this pawn, you know, it's still important. This brings the rook back, and just basically preparing to push the f pawn. So that's the name of the game. And white's pawns are actually kind of in his way now from more checks, which would be pretty helpful. So he gets him out of the way. But we see that black, you know, Carlsen, he's thought of this. And so now if rook a1, I mean, just black's king is just going to approach here. I mean, there's no way out. Maybe you can bring the rook here, push his king up. There's just not going to be a way out. So he plays a rook to a8. So yeah, I mean, you know, and I didn't want to defend passively. Rook a1 makes sense. In rook in games, you always want to get your rook behind so you can check the king instead of stuck in front of the pawn. But, you know, just this move and that's game over. There's no way for black, for white to stop. He's just going to queen the pawn, and these 2 pawns, you know, it's not going to be good enough against the rook, and the kings were already right here. So really impressive victory by Carlsen, and you know, this is where Anand resigned. So we'll see how the games, you know, 7 through 12 play out in the rest of this match if Anand can rebound.